The title of today's sermon is, Does God Exist? Does God exist? And this is a question actually that was a challenge given to me by quite a few people over the years of my life as a pastor. The last time somebody broached me with this question was about 2 years ago when I was in Korea. I was giving a lecture for the government employees there in Korea, and then the people found out that I was a pastor, and one of the gentlemen asked me, and his question was, do you believe in God? And I said, yes, absolutely. And his next question was, well then, who created God? Obviously that question, he was trying to, trap me, or maybe it was an honest, genuine question because he wanted to know who created God. Well, I'm not going to answer that question directly because that's an answer for another sermon, and there isn't obvious to me a very simple response to that question. But I bring that up because I want to approach this question to all of you. Does God exist? Does God exist? And if God does exist, then what is our responsibility? Then what is our response? Let's think about the word God. What is the meaning of the word God? God is really a loaded word in a sense that there's not one word that can truly define the word God. God is who? He's a creator. He's omnipotent. He's omniscient. He's all-powerful. He knows all. He is all. He's not a flesh. He's spirit. And if God is God, if He is all-powerful, then what is our response? What must be our response? In Exodus chapter 20 here, God gives us the first and the most important commandments. God gave us 10 commandments through Moses. And the first one He gave was, you shall have no other gods before me. And again, this is the first and the most important commandment from God. We've all heard it before. But I'm not sure many of us really understand the significance of this commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. It's not stated here. But what God is implying is there is but one God. There is but one true God. And that we are to meditate upon that truth. When I was researching for this sermon, I was reading a lot of different people's sermons and statements about this. And what I discovered was that the root problem, the main cause of people's disobedience to this commandment, that you shall have no other God before me, that you shall worship just one and only true God, the root cause really is people's lack of realization and meditation upon God. Because if we truly meditated, and if we truly took time to realize who God is, then we would be compelled to worship the one and only true God. I don't know if anybody heard of about the scandal that happened recently in Philippines. Philippines is a predominantly a Catholic country. And their president actually came out a few months ago and he was kind of mocking Christians and said, you know what? He promised, I will step down from this position of presidency if any of you can prove to me that God exists. And he also kind of implied afterwards, he's saying, well, how do you prove that? And he says, well, if you can take a selfie with God and show me the picture of God and prove to me that God exists, then I'll step down. To be fair, he was saying this and he was mocking Christianity because he has this deep resentment toward the Catholic Church of his home country, because he believed that the leaders of the Catholic Church are corrupt and they've been just taking money from the poor people. But frankly speaking though, when I first came upon this story and when I heard his challenge that if anyone can prove to me that I'll step down, my immediate response was this guy must be really stupid, because to me it is unbelievably easy to prove the existence of God. And because it's so easy for me, in my understanding, maybe I'm too simple. Maybe I'm being very naive. But to me, when I heard that, I'm like, This is so easy to prove. And he's actually putting up his position of presidency if somebody can prove the existence of God. And does he not know? Oh my goodness, it is so easy to prove the existence of God. And I'm being very honest when I say, for me, I don't get how anyone can ever deny the existence of God. And I can use the argument of the great designer, the great creator. I can talk about the origin. I can talk about just the human life, the DNA, the miracles, and I can look at the existence of life. I can use all of these things to prove, without a doubt, the existence of God, the creator, the origin. But for the sake of time today, I want to share with you just two, the most obvious and compelling reasons, from my perspective, for the existence of God. And if you want to research more, I just brought this book. I bought this book, Case for a Creator, and you can even see the movie. And this book gives you a little bit more in-depth knowledge. And it just gives you so many compelling, undeniable reasons why we cannot deny the existence of the Creator, existence of God. And both of my compelling evidence comes from Romans chapter 1, verse 20, where it says, listen carefully, it says, for his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, clearly seen, ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. In other words, what Paul is saying here, or the writer of Romans is saying here, is that we can clearly see God in the creation. We can clearly see the Creator when we look at all the creation. Now, some people might argue, I don't see it. And my argument is, how can you not see it? And that's what I'll be talking about with you today. The first and the most obvious place where we see God is in His creation. About 15 years ago, I attended a Christian event held by Louis Giglio. I don't know whether you guys are familiar. He's a well-known speaker. Louis Giglio and Chris Tomlin, he's a worship leader. And in that event, Louis Giglio was showing some pictures and images from the Hubble telescope. Hubble telescope was launched in about 1990. And ever since then, the Hubble telescope is sending us image after another and another of the image of the universe. And during that conference, during that event, Louis Giglio was showing some of those pictures, and it was amazing. The telescope was showing image from this distance of the universe, and from this distance from the universe, and from this angle from the universe. And as I was seeing this image of the universe, it just really, again, reminded me of the vastness of the universe, how great and big the universe is, and how small we are compared to that universe. And I remember I was astounded when I saw that. And my first inclination was how beautiful this universe is. And how beautiful is the creator of this universe. Psalm chapter 8, verse 3, in here, King David tells us that under the night sky, that King David had the same response that I had. It says here, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained. When David saw the skies, when David saw the stars, and when David looked around the universe, he was in awe because he knew that God had created the universe, that God had to have created the universe, that someone had to have created the universe, and it was God. Even one of the most ardent critics, an atheist, you've heard of him, his name is Stephen Hawking. Even he stated in his lecture, The Beginning of Time is the title. He said the universe has not existed forever. Rather, the universe and time itself had a beginning in the Big Bang Theory about 15 billion years ago. You know what he's really saying? And obviously he said this thing to defend the non-existence of God, but In his statement, he clearly says, and no one can deny this, he clearly says and admitted and agree with the Bible, the universe had not always existed. But how then did the universe arise? Did it come from nothing? Science has no answer to this question. Every scientist that talk about the Big Bang Theory and the origin, that talk about how the universe was created, but none of them has the answer as to the origin. Sir John Maddox, he's another well-known, distinguished scientist. He said this: only 70 years ago, the universe was found to be expanding. Now he says there's a model of how it began, the Big Bang. At the beginning, it said there was literally nothing, void, not even space. There, and listen carefully to the next statement. He says, then there came into being a tiny speck of superheated space that contained enough energy to create all the stars and galaxies that fill the sky, with enough left over to drive the expansion of the universe ever since. Let me re-explain to you all these mumbo-jumbo. Basically what he's saying is that we kind of have an idea of what might have happened in the beginning, the Big Bang Theory, but we still don't know what or who created or caused the universe. The bottom line is, no matter what people say, as scientists might, say or imply, they don't know who. They don't know what. They don't know the origin. And this is where the Bible gives us a very important perspective and understanding of the created universe. In Hebrews chapter 11, it says here, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. In other words, in the beginning, God created. King David reiterated this view in Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaim his handiwork. What King David is saying is that every time he looks up into the sky, he can't help but see the glory of God in the creation. One of my favorite places to visit in Korea. Anybody here been to Korea? I know the Koreans have. Okay, you haven't? If you ever visit Korea, I would recommend that you visit one of my favorite places to visit, which is it's a beach in the southern part of Busan called Haeundae Beach. And the reason why I like Haeundae Beach is because if you ever go there, along the beach, it is just bling, 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 lights everywhere. It's got apartments, restaurants, coffee shop. And for me, I like that. It's got people, crowded people, just lights galore. But this is the part that really, it makes it special. And as soon as you turn around 180 degrees, it is pitch black ocean. I don't know, for some reason, I love it because I love experiencing both. I love seeing the lights, I love seeing the people, I love seeing all these busyness. But at the same time, just 180 degrees, you experience this peace and calmness of the ocean and the darkness. I go there quite a few times, and when I go there, and this is what I experience almost every time, and that's why I love visiting Haeundae Beach. Is that after I look at all these people, and then all these people, I turn around and I see it's nothing but pitch black, and it goes as far as the eyes can see. And I'm just reminded just the vastness of this ocean and how small I am. And then I look up and I see stars. I see stars in the skies, and when I see the stars in the sky, I realize even this great vastness of the ocean is but a speck compared to the universe, and how small we are And in that moment, I'm just reminded just how big our God is. That everything here, I see the creation. And then I'm reminded when I see the vastness of the ocean and the vastness of the sky and the universe, how big our Creator is. And it really, really blesses me because it reminds me of God and His greatness. And I believe probably, I like to feel that King David probably experienced the same thing. How could you not? That whenever he looked up into the sky, that he was probably reminded of the greatness of God, the bigness of God. And for me, I want to challenge all of you. I think it's really healthy for us to do that time to time as well. I know my wife and I, time to time, we walk around in our neighborhood, and I like to look up at the sky sometimes. But I see, sometimes I don't see clear skies in Houston, but I think it's really good for us in our perspective, for us to time walk around and just look at the stars and really meditate upon the vastness of the universe and be reminded of how great and vast the Creator of this universe is. God exists. When we look at the creation, we cannot help but realize that leads us to the logical conclusion that there had to be an origin, a creator. To me, it's a no-brainer. Then when we see the creation, we see the Creator God. But to me, the most obvious place where we see God, and to me, it is so obvious, is when I see myself in the mirror every day. When I see myself in the mirror every day, I see the Creator, God. Because when I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, man, you are so good looking. You're amazingly handsome. And there had to be this amazing artist, creator, that created somebody that's so good. I know that most people cannot relate to this. Maybe except for Chandy. I'm sure you feel the same way when you look at yourself in the mirror every day. You're like, God! Only you can create such an image. Obviously, I'm joking about me being so handsome. But I'm not joking about the fact that whenever I see myself in the mirror, I'm reminded of my God, the Creator. Let me explain. Listen to the words of Job in chapter 12, verse 7 through 10. Job said this. He says, but ask the beasts, the animals, they will teach you. The birds of the heaven, they will tell you. Or the bushes of the earth, they will teach you. The fishes of the sea, they will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? And in His hand, in the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind. What Job is saying is, how can you deny God, the Creator, the giver of life, when you see life? Our universe contains way too much order for our existence to have been created out of chaos. We are complex beyond our imagination. And when you look at such a complexity, you see God in His creation. When you see life, the complexity of life, you have to logically conclude that there is a life giver, the Creator, God. For years and years, scientists, they've tried to create life from non-life, and they have failed every single time. Why? Because it is an impossibility. You cannot create life from a place where there is no life. It is impossible. Astrophysicist Hugh Ross, he commented on these failed attempts. He says, even under the highly favorable conditions of a laboratory, these soups have failed to produce anything remotely resembling life. With all our learning and technology, we cannot even come close to bringing life together in a lab. We cannot. Even though science has never, not even once, created life from non-life, some of the scientists are so determined to reject the idea of a creator God. They put aside all their scientific objectivity and still choose to believe what science has shown to be impossible, that life cannot come from non-life. Wow! I am no scientist. I hate to say this in front of my kids, but I was a B and C student in science. But it doesn't take, a superior knowledge. It doesn't take a genius to see that life cannot come from a non-life. So where does life come from? Only way, only explanation is that there has to be a life, a giver, a creator, an origin, a God. So why is it so many people deny and refuse to acknowledge that there is a creator God? 2 Peter 3 verse 5 and 6 really, to me, gives us the answer why people can deny God, the creator. In 2 Peter 3 verse 5 and 6, he says, they deliberately forget that God made the heavens and the earth by his words. They deliberately forget. King James Version states it this way: they willfully are ignorant. It means that the reason why people deny the existence of God, the reason why people deny the creator God, the life-giver God, is simply because of pride. They ignore all the evidence, but simply pride, they choose not to believe. Dr. Richard Lewontin, I'm not sure that's the way to pronounce it, but he's a Harvard geneticist. He said in his book in 1997, he said, materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. What he's saying is this: I don't care what the evidence say. I refuse to incorporate or accept or add the idea of a creator. I don't care. He says, I willfully choose not to accept the creator God, the life giver. This is the real reason for this belief. It's man's pride. Do you know why? Think about this. Because if we admit that we were created and that there is a creator, if we truly accept the premises that not only there's a creator for us, for the trees and the plants, but also the stars and the universe and the galaxy, then we must also admit that we are under the authority of this ultimate creator. To me, this is only logical. If we admit, and if it is true, that someone created us, that someone gave us life, and beyond and create the universe, then we must logically also accept the truth that we are under the authority of that creator. And this is the truth that many people don't want to admit and don't want to accept. There's a saying goes, and I hear this all the time in the secular world. People say, I am the master of my own universe. I control my own destiny. These words reflect the pride in humanity. That we don't want to accept God the creator, the God the origin. Why? Because we don't want to say, I am under someone's authority. And this is why knowing and worshiping the one and only God is important, and how it affects our society today. If we're just a simple result of some accidental chance, then we have authority And we can do whatever we want. And this is the power that many people don't want to relinquish. But if we are the result of a creation by a creator, then we know that we were created with a purpose and that the creator has the final authority over us. Whether we like it or not, that is the truth and the reality. And this was the truth and the realization that I encountered about 28 years ago that forever changed my life. Growing up, I had always assumed God existed. And listen to what I said. I had always assumed that God existed. And the reason was because everyone around me said God existed. I never really gave much thought to it. But I grew up in a church culture, at least in my elementary and junior high and high school age. And obviously, at church, people talked about God. And people just kind of talked about God, yet I believe God exists. Even back then, even in TV and so forth, everyone just assumed or talked about as God existed. And so for me, naturally, okay, God exists. But it was never personal realization. But when I reached the age of 21, without going into detail, I reached a very low point in my life. I mean, really, I was at a point where I shared this with many of you guys, that I was about to flunk out of college for the second time. And I just felt like there was no future. And there were a lot of bad things going on in my life, in my family life. And it was in that moment God revealed himself to me through answered prayer. And it was in that moment that I realized two important truths that forever changed my life. And one was that God was real. Again, up until that time, I believed in the existence of God simply because that's what everyone just kind of said. And it was for the first time in my life, I knew through answered prayers. And I knew for me personally, God is real. There is a God. I have never actually before then thought about, contemplated, and meditated on that truth, that there is a God. How often do we really think about that? How often do you think about that? When you go through your daily life, we're so busy about school, making money, family, about the future. How often do people in this world really think about God, the creator of the universe? How often is it personal to people? For the first time in my life, at that age, that truth became personal. And I realized for the first time that God was real. And I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to say it in a way to convey to you how much impact that truth had on me in that moment. That God was real. It had a profound impact on me in my life. But more importantly, the second realization, it changed my life forever, is that through that experience, I realized that not only was God real, but that creator of the universe, giver of life, that God, that He cared for me, that He knew me. For this amazing God, this God of the universe, knew this little old me, this speck. He knew me. He knew me enough to hear my prayers. He knew me enough to answer my prayers. And He loved me enough to guide me and lead me in the right path. And that forever changed my life. And this is something that a lot of non-believers don't realize this. But it was that realization of God, and it was that realization that He knew me, that He loved me, and He cared for me. It filled my heart in that moment with gratitude and sorrow. I was just so thankful to God for so many things. One, for creating me. Two, to answering my prayers. Three, for loving me and caring for me. But at the same time, I was filled with sorrow that for 21 years of my life that I had rejected Him, that I have shamed Him. And it was in that moment I knew that I had to live my life serving Him, obeying Him, and following Him. And to me, it wasn't because I felt like that's what God demanded. And even in that moment, there was no thinking or knowledge of hell entered in my life. None. I was not thinking, I have to live a good life because I don't want to experience the penalty of sin here and after. For me, in that moment, if God is God, and again, I don't know how to convey this in any other way with words, but if God is God, how can I not serve Him? How can I not follow Him? Elijah, the prophet of God, put it best in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 12. He says, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? He said, if the Lord is God, follow Him. As simple as that. If Lord is God, if Jesus is God, we must follow Him. It's only logical. I'm so thankful for Pastor Lum because I've taught classes like this, but I'll be very honest, I think Pastor Lum will be better. Beginning September, he's going to do an 8-week series. And he's going to talk about world religion and cults. After I became a Christian, when I said, if God is God, then I must follow Him. And if Jesus is God, then I must follow Him. And I began to examine different world religion, different philosophy. And I'll be very honest. You can say I'm biased, but okay, it's a biased opinion. To me, it is undeniable that Christianity makes the most sense, is most logical. And all the other religion has such flaws. And I'm not here to just bash down other religion. But the more I studied the Bible, the more I studied Christ, the more I said to myself, I am so thankful that I'm a Christian. And we all need to search for that truth. Who is God? God exists. It's not an argument. It's not up for debate. That is the point of my whole sermon. That's not a debate. God is real. He exists. Then who is that God? And if Jesus is Lord, if Jesus is God, then we must follow Him. And I challenge every one of you. I cannot wait for me and my family to take that class. Because honestly, Pastor Lum is a better teacher. And in the end, if you come to the same conclusion that I came up with, if Jesus is God, then we must follow Him. We shall worship no other God except Him. Let's pray.